And it's crazy because it's like fractured words. I mean, if you look at it, it'll look like a Bulgarian poem or something. And it has wonderful sort of etchings by Stoyman Stoylov inside as well, 6 of them. It's a great collection. And we're also here to celebrate transformation. How you put a poem into another language, I guess, is the issue. And Barbara Goldberg has won it for the Valentin Krustiv Award for Poetry, for translation. Valentin was a guy who was a great friend, a lawyer. William Meredith met him in 1978, and they traveled together. He was William's first official translator at these Writers' Union's events in Bulgaria called Peace, the Hope of the Country. And he continued on to be a great friend, and he got right under the political subterfuge. You know, he really told us what the world was like in Bulgaria at the time. There's a picture of him here at the hygienic. He was alive and well. Anyway, he fell over his computer and he died last week. He was a great guy, really a great guy, and so we have this award in translation named for him, Valentin Krustiv. And it's going to continue. This prize will continue. We hope for it to continue every 2 years. We hope that it will be something that we can do for translation. It's really important. We have a third book here, Lisa Ritchie. She's the yellow-headed book. I think I have to have that. Could you bring that up here, please? Lisa Ritchie is an 89-year-old fiction writer from Maryland, and she is great. She really talks about the aging process, being that old, what the land smells like, what the rivers are like, and so she's really terrific. And she still has the sex drive and her, from what I hear. and one of the happy things is that Serena Bates, whose wonderful sculpture you see here, isn't something else. Oh my God. This is my big favorite guy here. If I had enough money, I would buy that guy. Anyhow, this is her sculpture, which appears throughout this book of short stories by Elizabeth Ritchie. And they're great. The stories are great. And the woman is great. So we're happy, you know, we're happy we're on a roll, as it were. I think at this point, because, you know, I've had my driver bring this over here. A little bit of beverage on the way. Serena, I'd like you to come and talk a little for a few minutes, please, about your work. This would be important.
Well, I know most of you here. And, if you know my work, I'm a storyteller. I like to convey a quirky situation or quirky incident. The world around me influences what I can in my work. So today I tried to bring some of my sea-oriented pieces. I have my survivor piece right here, which is symbolic of, you know, for a lot of us, we've survived a lot of struggles in our life. Being short is one of mine. Anyway, and ironically, he looks like my ex-husband. So the world around me influences my work in a great way. And but especially the sea. I had the fortune to work at the Mystic Aquarium for a number of years and the Mystic Seaport, so I have an affinity for the sea, and it influences my work greatly. Here's another piece that Richard owns. It's Dolly. It's Hello Dolly. It's a series of sheep, you know, Dolly, the first cloned sheep. They're the same, but they're different. So it's the same sheet, but on all different levels and ledges and variations. So, but he has the honor of having the only pure one. So, but I'm a local artist. I have my studio right on Potter Hill Road in Westerly. If anybody would like to see it, I work in bronze and clay and stone. I have the honor of going to Arkansas the first week in May for a big sculpture symposium expo. If anybody's interested in coming to check it out.
What were you doing up at the that fancy yellow house up on the river, Ocean House?
Oh, I was one of the resident artists this past summer at the Ocean House, and I got to sculpt the head of Chuck Royce, which I'm donating to the Ocean House, and hopefully they'll put it on their mantle.
Good. So your friend, this gentleman Richard, has a kind of a ballroom where you can look at art and you can drink and watch art.
Yes,
and
my other half is opening a nightclub.
Nightclub, that's the word.
A dinner nightclub. It's the old Rossellini's for all of you who are local. It's going to be the Phoenix Dinner and Dining Room Club. But we'll also have a gallery, so we're going to have big bands and small bands and acoustic music and art, and it opens up in April 19th and 20th. It's right by the movie theater. So if you guys are looking for an eclectic mix. Yes.
How did you get involved with the author in the book? Do you have a professional relationship, or do you know her?
That was strictly Richard's idea. It's like, he approached me, he liked my Amun Ra, my ramp, and asked me if he could use it, and then it evolved into this whole collaboration where we matched up. But they don't necessarily represent each story. But my pieces are a story unto themselves, and the stories are stories. So it's just a collaboration.
And the author, the yellow book.
Lisa Ritchie, yeah, she's down in
It's
Maryland.
my first time hearing her name, so I'd like to read the book.
Yeah.
Any other books that she's written that we might want to? Any other works that we might want to read?
Babushka's Beads, for example. This is a great book of poetry. We've published about 4 of her books, actually. But Elizabeth Ritchie is her last name, R-I-T-C-H-I-E. You can Google her, and all the work will be there. I should have it in my mind's eye, but forgive me.
No, yeah, look at the book.
Well, okay, there it is. Take a look at the back of the book.
Anyway, thank
Thanks,
you.
Mom.
Thank you.
Yeah. Right now. Is it time for the Academy music to come on when they drag the guy off, you know? Okay, so here it is. I really like to talk about Barbara. Good time. Right. My mother used to say, if they're important, tell them to take the address and come here. Okay. So we're going to go now to Barbara Goldberg. She has won the Valentin Christoph Award for translation. And this is the book. Valentin Christoph was a remarkable Bulgarian guy, a lawyer. As I mentioned, he was William's translator in '78, the first time William went there. Then he became a friend, and he sort of understood the political currents, and he was always active. I lived at River Run, and he one day he came out and he said, "We're going to make a wood pile for you." And he took this whole cord of wood up to the front door, but the wood stove was on the lower floor on the back door. But it was okay. I mean, he was okay. He was proud of his work. He was a big, stocky guy, who was a good lawyer and a lovely translator. And we worked for many years. So this is the book which has won this year's prize. It's for Barbara Goldberg. I would like to read, let's see, Myra Sklarou is a local poet of some stature. She says, "Languages are living organisms, according to George Steiner. Barbara Goldberg in transformation comes into her true landscape as she moves between languages, exploring the evolution of her restless and profound journey. At long last, she can tell on her multiple resources, poetry and prose, humor and tragedy, life in this century cast in the shadow of 19th century Vienna. The hidden memories of loved ones, even the dead who can't keep a secret. So these are, this are her parents, you know. Went down in the Holocaust in Czechoslovakia. The reason I like this book so much is because it has a lot to say about the art of translation, which is why we're celebrating it. Here's what she says. Well, bear with me, bear with me. Once a famous judge asked me if my manuscript was, you know, Jewish manuscript. I certainly didn't hide that I was Jewish, but not in the way he imagined. I grew up in a totally secular home. I felt Jewish culturally and historically, but certainly not in the religious sense. Then, famous judge asked if my manuscript was American. In other words, grounded in Whitman and Dickens. Well, no, I responded. My psychic landscape were the dark forces of the Brothers Grimm. My Bible was shock-headed cautionary tales filled with gory pictures. Don't suck your thumb because Conrad, the natty tailor, would come in at night and cut it off. Don't light matches because you could catch on fire and die. Sometimes the ravenous wolf at my door gobbles up a translation, which, by the way, can be just as satisfying to create an original. Well, a lot of the time. I get to transform a dreadful first draft, the literal word-for-word translation, into a poem. First drafts of my own poems are similarly dreadful. In fact, when I was teaching, I used to share copies of my first drafts with students, saying that they were not much different from their own, except I knew what to do with them once on the page. That's why I believe that it takes a poet to translate a poem, as opposed to prose. The same skills it takes to write your own poems are used. An ear for music, rhythm and tone, adroitness in language, in creating metaphor, in welding the knife. Translation asks that you refine, hone, and have the discipline to cut your darlings for the sake of the poem. People seem surprised when my poetry say do not speak the source language. That, in fact, being a poet is more crucial to the process of poetry translation than knowledge of the foreign language. It's not for nothing that literary translation is called an art. So she goes on and on. I mean, she's great. She's one of the thinkiest persons I know about this field. And I used to look at the field. Anyhow, I was going to ask for you to look at Mark Patno. Regard Mark Patno. Mark is not here. I picked these up today from his studio. He's not been well. He has a little flu, a returning flu, and a dead stepmother, and a heart situation. But he's okay. I picked up these paintings from him, and these came from a recent trip to Israel. And so, I mean, I want to give him his due, after all. You know, like a lot of you know him. He's a really great local painter. He's been featured in numerous galleries and museums, a recipient of Who's Who Lifetime Achievement Award. Patno is a member of the Salmagundi Club, Mystic Museum of Art, Norwich Arts Center, the Bulgarian American Creative Society, UAI Fellow, IPARC Fellow, VSC Fellow, based on Connecticut State Arts Council, and serves on the Executive Board of Directors, Purchase College Alumni Association. Anyway, he's a nice local painter. He has a really good impressionistic take on the community, as far as I'm concerned. And his works grace this book. he was kind enough to give us a number of his paintings to sort of act as kind of bookmarks, you know. Here's one, for example, which is right in the book. So he's a lovely guy, and I'm sorry he's not here today. He wasn't feeling well, but he's okay. Now, end of the night. Forgive me, and I hope I'm not going over. I should have a little watch out here coming up. This is Tom Kirlin, who flew up today from Washington, D.C. to be with us. He left his wife and children who were down there celebrating from another town. What was it? Like
New Orleans.
New Orleans. Anyhow, he came, I picked him up, it's great, and here's his thing. He won the Larry Neal Award for Poetry. He's also on the Arts and Fellowship from the National Endowment for the Humanities, postdoctoral studies at Yale, taught at the University of Wisconsin-Madison before moving to Washington, where he worked for decades on energy, environment, science, and technology policy issues, including the UN climate negotiations and the Kyoto Protocols. So he's been sort of in the loop in D.C. for a long time. He and his wife Catherine helped celebrate the Smithsonian Institution's 25th Folklore Festival by collecting recipes and authoring the Smithsonian Folklife cookbook. It's still a good cookbook. Has a New Orleans influence in it. At any rate, he's a great, lovely guy who knew William well, and I'll show you one photo here. Here Tom is with his wife, Catherine, and William in the Bethesda house, you know, back in the old days. William was kicking and everything. So Tom and Catherine have been friends for a long time. So I'm going to stop now, Tom. Thank you. Tom Kirlin, I didn't do well by your
No, you didn't. Set your books down. Good evening. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. It is always a delight to find people who enjoy not only the arts, but the written word and poetry. And the thing that's left out of my biography is I'm from North Iowa. And when you grow up out there in the dark skies at night, the moon comes up. Now, those of you who know about how potatoes are grown, I suspect a few of you do, you slice them into discrete parts based on their eye, which then becomes a root. And then as that center dissolves, a new plant grows above a vine. Beneath, of course, is the potato moon. So under the potato moon, I will bury one eye in dirt, tilt a cleft heart to old earthworms, and wiggle a white leg bright with the secrets of earth. Under the potato moon, our desires will rise thick on your side to a rock, until laundry hangs wide from the vine, limp as old sex, moist and forgot. Under the potato moon, the child will rake blood from our eyes and toss back her straw locks. For tonight the gardener tines the red heart, so ready to walk. So that's a poem from an earlier book called Under the Potato Moon. And I'm honored to spend the evening here with you. Compliments of Richard Harteis and William Meredith Foundation and the Savoy Café and good bookstore. I'm impressed with the quality and range of books that I see around me. I want to introduce you to at least my understanding of William Meredith, which is later in life, after I had done some writing and after I met him, after he had had a stroke and was suffering from aphasia. So he could not speak what he fully understood. So he's fully aware but could not express himself the way he did. But as I said, he was a warrior. He served in World War II and in the Korean War as a naval pilot and carrier. And then he became, of course, a poet and teacher here at Connecticut College. And then, as I say, he became a muse first to himself and then to others. Because his better works, the ones that won the Pulitzer Prize, like Partial Accounts, which is a selection, and as well as new poems of some of the very best, and the National Book Award and others, LA Book Award, were completed with the help of Richard and others, certainly Williams, after he had suffered that stroke. What I have done in my presentation is to walk in on him after his passing, but with an understanding of him when he was still alive. And what I do is I walk through those different phases of his life. And I start with a poem that defines how he understood, I think, his task as a poet, which first started as a rather classical sense in a poem which talks about a young man uncarving a rock in sculpture and discovering a young woman with a lyre singing beautifully, praising, as we would know, the classical arts. But then later in a poem, he talks in a more familiar voice, which I'll get to. But he starts with a definition of what a poet is in a poem called A Korean Woman Seated by a Wall. A poet penetrates a dark disguise after his own conception, little or large, crossing the scaleless Asia of trouble, where it seems no one can give himself away. He gives himself away. He sets a scale. I think that's really the nature of William. As I read him, I keep hearing a voice that's somewhat consistent with that of St. Augustine, of Confessions. So a lot of his poems, and I have to dwell on the difficult choices he made as an artist, so I'm not conveying his joie de vivre as much as I would like to. But those of you who knew him to be a tremendous energy and joy. But he made choices as he matured as an artist, and he's tried to find a way to, as I say, educate and create a literate imagination. And one of the poems that is most evident is one called The Wreck of the Thresher. And of course you know here in this area that submarine and its accident years ago, and how it was devastating and was a marvelous opportunity for Richard or for William to write a poem which ends with, "The ocean was salt before we crawled to tears." That single line, the last line, captures that sense of evolution, that sense of grief, of finding a way forward. And he finds in dreams a valve jar that helps us stay alive, to dive and to return to the surface. So that is part of the next part of the poem, as I discover his works. Another section is one that comes off a poem. So I'm trying to translate in my mind how he matured as an artist, but I also want to understand how we should remember him and how we should celebrate his achievements as a poet. And he has a lovely poem called The Illiterate. And this is why I come to the illiterate imagination. And in William's book he says, "Touching your goodness, I am like a man who turns a letter over in his hand. And you might think that this was because the hand was unfamiliar. But truth is, the man has never had a letter from anyone. And now he is both afraid of what it means and ashamed he has no other means to find out what it says than to ask someone. His uncle could have left the farm to him, or his parents died before he sent them word, for the dark world changed and wanted him for the beloved. Afraid and letter proud, he keeps it with him. What would you call his feeling for the words that keep him rich and orphan and beloved?" Seems to me that's what we owe to those who have passed before us, of great accomplishments, as William certainly was. So by the time you get about a third of the way through the book, I write a poem called The Muse and Her Gentleman. Touched by literate longing, he was like the man who could lay a hand across her heart. This is to his muse. And you might think this is because his hand was unfamiliar, but truth is, she had never had a man who was a friend. Now he is both afraid of what she is and does, and interested because she says she is a dancer at a downtown gentleman's club. She could touch his arm, intimately or not. He could send her flowers or flowery words to her hotel room, saying he is coming or not. He thinks he talks too much, and he is not beloved. What do you call this awkward silence, which stands now between dead poets, honest praise, and us? We the living, naked, afraid, they humble remnants. Aren't time and death sufficient to meet this requirement of love? True remembrance is neither rich nor poor nor orphan nor vain nor ignorant. Death is well read. Remembrance is pensive, private, unsettled, awake, irreverent. Deep inside us, in death, true friendship becomes neither sleep nor sufficient. Once among the living, William has become a muse. Your daughter, my son, a love among us for words born well after high school graduation. This morning, online, feeling orphaned, she looks for empty spaces. His grave is full, my page undone. A wicked wink and her will is done. We write for less literate daughters and sons. Still, she's touched. A tear runs, perhaps in raccoon sorrow. She looks hard at you, he at us, and laughs off those slight bumps, but not first before turning and sticking us with that wry, untimely smile. You, Sir William the pen, will never be a fresh joint tossed into vapor sand. Let me do about 2 or 3 more points and then move on. There's a point where he reaches in his writing. Thank you. 5 minutes?
Curious.
Okay, that's fine.
We like dinner things done.
Indeed, we won't delay the dinner too long. There's a point at which William talks about the end of deception. He has a wonderful 4 lines that said, "There is no end to the deception of quiet things, and of quiet everyday people a lifetime brings." And so I talk about how he has moved beyond that earlier notion of poetry to one more advanced. And then he gets to a point of self-reckoning. And it's essentially, what does he do with compassion and with the love he feels? He says, drawing from Greek mythology, "At the edge of the Greek world, I think, was a cliff to which fallen gods are chained, immortal. Time is without forgiveness, but intermittently he sends the old, sentimental, hungry vulture compassion to gnaw on the stone victuals of each of us, even the young, as if to ready each of us, even the old, for an unthinkable event he foresees for each of us, a reckoning, our own." As William goes forward in his life and in his art and suffers from the stroke that causes the expressive aphasia, he writes about, "When I wake," it's sort of the center canon whole that Yeats was a major influence on his life. "When I wake up, what am I to do with this mortifying life I have saved again?" So it's really, he just sort of looks you straight in the eye and just says, what am I going to do with this thing in my life? And at this point, I believe, as he's now into the 1960s and 70s and seeing a different world, certainly in the World War II, the post-World War II era, he turns and creates a mask. It's called Hazard the Painter. And in that character, he critiques his own literary life from the standpoint of being a painter. And he has some wonderful, wry comments about who and what that poet was or was not. At the same time, he finds a way forward and gets back to writing what you and I might consider less witty but more consequential poems. And one of them is a poem called Consequences. As I say, he has this incredible sense of sort of directly staring at the facts of the human condition and not flinching. And to me, that is admirable to him. The second part of a poem called Consequences. The first one is of choice, the second is of love, which I'll read to you. "People love each other, and the light of love gilds but does not alter. People don't change one another, can scarcely by taking will and thought add a little now and then to their own statures, which, praise them, they do. So that here we are, in all our sizes, flooded in impartial daylight sometimes, spotted sometimes in the light we make ourselves. Human, the beams of attention of social animal at their work, which is loving, and sometimes all dark. The only correction is by you, of you.